So thank you everyone for coming. Today we're going to talk about automations for enhanced production management. Erin is our lovely host. My name's Lee. I'm a software trainer at Omnitas. I teach people how to use software. That is my primary role. Whereas Erin is our customer success manager, and he brings over 15 years of experience in logistics and shipping. Besides that, Erin is an avid Marvel Comics enthusiast. So he has quite a fun personality, and I'm sure you guys will see that and feel that today. I'll be manning the chat. So if anyone has any questions, I will bring them through, and I'll just be facilitating today. So Erin, if you're happy to take over.
Amazing. Thank you very much for a wonderful introduction. I'm not sure I can live up to the title, but yeah, as Lee alluded to, my name's Aaron. Recently joined Omnitas as customer success manager, as well as the 15 years or so of logistics experience. I've also got experience in Monday.com, having worked with them for about the last 4.5 to 5 years in various different roles, and more recently in the customer success role. So the purpose of today is for me to run through, I'm going to just quickly run through a little bit about who Omnitas is. Then I'll really just dive straight into the Monday.com stuff and explain a bit more about what we want to do with that. And then we'll leave hopefully a few minutes at the end for questions if anyone's got any. And then we'll take it from there. So who is Omnitas? So we are a digital management consultancy firm who basically are based, we've got a head office in Stockholm, but we've also got an office based in, or people based in London and the surrounding UK. We help companies digitalize and map and optimize workflows and processes across all levels of organization, growing at pace, both internally and geographically, trusted by over 600 brands plus, and a partner portfolio consisting of leading SaaS solutions. As well as that, we are a Monday.com Platinum partner, and we've been awarded several awards by Monday.com, mostly for our PS efforts, our professional service efforts, in the last 2 years or so. So that's a bit about Omnitas, and the purpose of today is to show you a bit more about Monday.com and some key automations in a production lifecycle. So I'm just going to hop across now to my Monday.com system. So you guys may or may not be familiar with the layout of Monday and in terms of Monday and how it works with the boards and the structure of Monday. But I'm going to show you a few different boards today, and hopefully leading into a key workflow. So the purpose of what I'm showing you guys today is we called it enhanced project management or production management. The idea is that this is catering to businesses where there's a very strict kind of process or a way in which you've got multiple teams working on parts of an overall job that lead up to an end result being a delivered product. So, for example, the example I built this around today is a past experience with a client in kind of the printing industry. So that's kind of where I'm alluding to with this. But essentially, we're going to start life here today on our jobs board. So this is where the incoming jobs would come into. These are the headline kind of details around a particular job coming in. And then we'll talk through some of the columns in a second as we put this in. But essentially what we're looking at is a jobs board with some connected boards for various parts of the process. And the idea being is that we can use this board to track the progress of the job itself through the Monday.com status columns on a job level, but also on the subsequent board levels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the process of a job and touch on each of the boards as we go through. So in this process in particular, what we're looking at is a company that potentially sets a job up, decides on the pathway, and then instigates the job. So say we've got a job coming in, and I'm just going to call this leaflets A4, something like that. So as we come across here, what we can do is we can actually, within the automations we've got built in Monday, we can actually use it to find a client name. So I've used a match automation. So if I just type in one of the client names here, What it'll do is it'll then go off to my customer's board that sits over here. And if it finds a match, it'll pull that record back and connect it. So we're now connected to a client. I can give this a job number. That can be any combination of reference that we need to put in here. That's basically a text column. And then as we come over, I'm going to be the person in charge of running this job. This is where we can assign somebody to it. We know the deadline of the inquiry of the job is July, and we're going to say the 31st of July. The cost for the job, we've quoted the customer 5,000, and this could be a number that feeds from a number of different sources if you've got a CRM or anything integrated with money. So I'm going to take a sip. And then in the next few columns, what we're going to do is actually dictate the pathway that our job is going to flow. So if we've got 3 particular stages in the journey, say artwork and design, printing, and then finally cutting, what I'm going to use the status columns and the connections in Monday to actually go off and create those various stages on the boards for those particular teams to work on. Now, what we can do is we've got stage 1, for example. I can say, yes, that's needed. I can pick a type. So if there's a subtype of that, maybe you've got different printing methods, different machines, maybe different ways of working, but it's a way of subcategorizing it. And in this case, I'm going to use a type A. I'm going to say, yes, my stage 2 is needed. It's a type B, and then I'm going to say yes. And again, it's important to say that we can obviously customize this in any way, shape, or form. Monday is super flexible to this. So now we've put in our job details and we've decided the pathway. What we need to do is now actually initiate that job. Now we've checked, we've got all our job details correct in here. I can go to click me. Now, what that is that's a button column in Monday that's linked to many different automations. And what you'll see quickly happens here is that it's begun the journey for us. So in the next status column, you'll see it's changed the status for ready for stage 1. Next to that, we've then got, you can see something has appeared. What that is a connect board column that's linking to an item that's just been created for us on that other board. And then we're using a mirror column to simply mirror back the status from our stage 1 team board. What that's doing is it's giving a direct reflection of that job. Now, if I hop across to our stage 1 or artwork and design board, as we've called it, and if I go onto my main table here, you'll see my leaflets A4 job has created here now. And what it's done is it's given me the details of that job, but it's also carried across using mirror columns because it's a 2-way sync. It's pulled over the due date, the type, but it's also pulled through the connection to that item, because it's important that we can click on that item and we can see the job, high-level job details, and we can interact with that if we need to. So what we can do is, as we come across here, when we've pulled this job in, another key column type that I've used for this, in this example, is I've got my estimated effort. This is an amount of hours that I think someone's going to spend on that particular job. And what it is it's using my type column to dictate what those hours are. So for example, if it's actually not a type A, it's going to be a type B, you can see the number of hours changes based on that categorization that we've given it, because maybe a certain type of printing or cutting or whatever the case may be takes longer than others, and we want to allow more time for that. So what we've then done is we've allowed, as an engineer working or an artwork designer that's now come into this, or somebody managing that team, I'm now going to actually assign that to a member of my team. And what we can now do is we can see, for this level of artwork and design, I can see my statuses. I can assign it a timeline. So I can say, working stuck, done on it. Obviously, this is manipulated by your decisions, by what you need this to say, but essentially out of the box, we've got this kind of RAG status. So as I come across, I'm going to say, okay, within that time frame, I'm going to work on this between these dates for 7 hours, and I'm going to kick off because I'm now starting to work on that. It's been assigned to me. I can change that to working on it. Now, the automations that we've used here means that effectively we've now started our time tracking, and you can see the time ticking away there, and we can keep a running log of any time logs that have been used against that item. Now, the key thing with this, and the way that I've set this up, is if I flick back and I now put on my job manager role, or the account manager, whoever's looking after the job itself, if I flick back to my jobs board, what you will see is my status label is actually updated here through the mirroring functionality. And what that's doing is it's actually now saying, okay, somebody's working on it. So if I'm looking after this job and a customer phones up and somebody says, where's this thing at, or where are we at in the process, I can quickly see that it's in stage 1, it's being worked on, right? So we can now see that it's in progress. And what this now will do is, if I'm now put back on my artwork and design hat and I'm working on this job, what we can now essentially do is change this status to done. I'm completed with the work. It's going to now move that into my completed work group. And what it's also going to do is stop my time tracking for me. So the time has now been recorded as this is the actual time. And we've got a log of effort versus capacity. So how long we thought it would take versus how long it actually ended up taking. And so if I flick back to my jobs board now, what you'll quickly see is for my leaflets A4 job, is that now it's been marked off as done. And so in essence, what this should now do for us is it will create the item on my next stages board. And what it will mean is that now as I go into my stage 2, it should now flick onto my next stage board. Apologies, it's taken a bit of time. But what it will essentially do is do what we've just done for stage 1 and complete that. And it will mark off a stage 1 complete, and it will go off and create that job inside the next stages board, which will be, say, for example, my printing board. So as we flick over here, apologies, there's obviously some delay with the creation of the item, but effectively that item will now create under that board with that linker mirror. And what it now means is you can effectively see that what it's done is it's now marked the next stage as complete. So now that next stage is complete, it will go on to then completing that next stage. And we can run through that whole process and go through this in the same way and have those things ticking off as we go through. Now, the question to this is now, what do we do when it doesn't follow every stage and you haven't got a yes against every one? What we can actually do is, if I create another example here, and again, we call it leaflets, and we call it A5. And this time what we'll do is we'll actually attach it to a different client. So we'll call that Nike. And so if I come in here, assign that to myself and give it, obviously, again, run that through again, give it a timeline. Now, the difference is that this time, what we're going to do is actually, as we come across, is I'm going to say no to this one, but yes to this one, and no to that one. Then if I now come across here and I actually trigger this button here, what it's going to do is, hopefully when it starts the job, is it will actually go off and it will create the item. And you can now see that the stage has changed to ready stage 2 because it's actually skipped stage 1. It's created the item here, and we're now ready to begin working on it within our stage 2, because maybe not every step applies and you want it to come in at different places. So now you can see on my printing board, which is technically my stage 2, we can actually see in here, leaflets A5 has now come in as a job. And again, we can work through that. We can start and stop our time tracking, and we can complete the job, which will then in turn back on my jobs board. It will then look at obviously what we've selected, and depending on what we've selected, it will then change the status into whatever the relevant next stage is. And once we actually get to the end of this whole process, what we will see is that we can change it to QA, and we can follow these steps. So when we get to the end of the job and we've completed all our parts, it will mark it as ready for QA. And then it will add a job onto our QA board, which marks it then as ready to begin our QA process. So if I go over to our QA process board, you will then see that job will start to appear. Sorry, the automations are a bit delayed today, but essentially what it will do is it will create that job onto that quality assurance board, and it will link it back. And the important part in all of this is that what we're doing through all of these stages is allowing different people to work on this, those changes to reflect, and not only those changes to reflect, but those mirror columns are now reflecting the status of the overall job and moving it through our process and getting it to an end result of going, okay, job is complete. Now that the job is going to be dispatched, and that's going to be moved out. Once that job is dispatched, then we can obviously trigger those automations to say the job has been complete, etc., etc. And the key part of this is that it's really crucial that although you've got disparate teams that working all over the place and communicating backwards and forwards using the mirror columns, what you've then got is a workflow that allows those teams to work and those changes to reflect back. And the great thing about that is as we build that data out, is we can then start to report and reflect on it in lots of different ways. So, for example, when we're looking at our artwork and design board, for example, we can turn that into a workload view. And what we can actually then do is look at our jobs for the week or jobs for the month or whatever the case may be, and turn it into a resource allocation piece where when a new job comes into this board, the person running that particular team, say the artwork and design team, can come in here and can actually see what resources they've got available, who's working on what, and what time they've got associated to that. And with the Monday's workload and capacity tool, we can then stipulate how many hours that person or those people work. But not only that, we can, if your resource is not a person, it's maybe a machine or something like that, we can obviously choose our resource type within this as well. So rather than it being an owner, we can change it to a status column or something like that, where you can actually look at resources rather than being people, might be machines, or you can then see the availability of that machine and what machine to put it to when it comes to it. But ultimately, the goal is that what we're trying to show you is that through the automation suite within Monday is that you can create workflows that have multifaceted channels that send things to different boards, connecting it back and making sure everybody stays ahead of it.
Hey, Aaron, we've got a question. Are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Sorry, yeah.
No, that's all right. So from the audience, we have a question. Which automations are you using?
Oh, perfect. Amazing. Yeah. So in terms of the automations that I've used for this piece, one of the key ones that people don't know or don't always know about is within Monday's templated automation. So if I go into the automation suite for a second, the key one that I'm using here that people don't always know about is the one that uses this. You see this little curved arrow here. What that basically means is the column that I'm using for the status is actually a mirrored column. And there aren't that many, or that is probably the only automation I know of that uses a mirror column to impact the overall status column. So in this example here, when my QS status is changing, that is actually a mirrored column on the jobs board. It will now actually change the status of the overall job to QA complete. That's one of the key ones. The other key one that I've used here is the match automation. So when we saw earlier, when I showed you guys the fact that I typed in the client name and it found a match, this is using the match automations in Monday, which allow you to look at either a column change or an item being created, and where the text or whatever column you choose from, it will actually go off and search the other board for that matching criteria and link the two together and create that connection for you. The third one that I'll mention, and it'll be the last one that I talk about, is what I've actually done is created threaded custom automations. So for example here, when the status changes from ready stage 2 to stage 2 complete, only if stage 3 is marked as yes, will it then create an item on the stage 3 board and link them back. So what that's doing is it's not only using the custom automation piece, but it's also using filters to say, only create the item if stage 3 is marked as needed to be done. If not, skip that stage, and we can create an automation that would then skip that stage and change the overall job status to the next piece of the puzzle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Perfect. So just in the consciousness of time, are there any other questions as well, Lee, before I carry on?
No other questions.
Amazing. So the last piece that I was then talking about is obviously building out these workflows and being able to have things seamlessly move between boards, but mirror back so people can see the overall status. Once we get to that point, what we can also do is if we can flip it on its head, and if I'm now putting on my hat as an account manager, for example, I can now go into my customers and I can actually see at my customer level the details around my particular customers that I'm responsible for managing. And if I then go into the updates within Monday, you have what's called an item card view. So we can now use this to look at a particular client, for example, see their data, but then in the next pane down, I'm looking at jobs that are linked to that client. So then we can start looking at it from another perspective of this is the nuts and bolts data of what's going on the day-to-day, but then I'm looking at it from an account management perspective where I'm now seeing any linked items, any linked jobs and things, and any audit trails and things like that I can keep against the client. And that gives me that ability to go from a client level to flip into a job level to then being able to go further down and report on that detail. So the last piece that I just wanted to talk about, as we've got 5 more minutes left, is once we've accumulated these workflows and once we've got these automations working and linking items together and adding items to boards and creating this overall piece, the last piece that we can touch on is actually taking all of that data, because I understand that when you're splitting out the workload, you have all the data spread across multiple boards. Well, what we can do inside Monday is we can actually take that and feed it into a dashboard, and then we can actually start giving a more holistic view of what the current state of affairs are within our business. And so we can then pull those jobs together that we were looking at earlier, of that process of going, here's a job, here's it moving through the cycles, here's people working on it, here's stuff being dispatched. And we can go, okay, now I want to look at it holistically and see maybe what jobs I've got in what statuses, so I can see a count of items in the jobs board by status. I can see an overall timeline, so I can get an overarching view of where the jobs are at. I can do graphs that show me financials, so by customer, what money we've made. And then down here, we can see jobs by month and by status. So I can then break it down even further and look at, okay, what have I got monthly? How many jobs have I got going on, and what status are those jobs at? And then lastly, we can then pull together that workload piece that I showed you earlier, which is the ability to actually manage the workload, not just on a singular job level or a singular team level, but is actually collating all of that data together and seeing it on a more holistic level of what capacity we've got as a business across the different teams, across the different boards, and across the different workflows that we've got. And I think this is the way that we can stitch all of that information together and then bring it all together. So just to recap quickly in the last couple of minutes we've got available to us. So what I showed you there was having a job come in, being able to then fill in the details for that job, kickstart the job, and then move it through your process, but not through manual dropping it down and selecting what stage it's at, but it actually being dictated by the stages of the job in itself. And actually then being able to create jobs in each individual team's boards for them to be able to update, that then updates the overall job. And it's more automated than having to think to yourself, I've got to do this job, then I've got to send it to this team to do, and then I've got to make sure they're doing their job. That's all done from that higher level jobs board, and that brings it together. So that's as much as I've got to show you guys today. I hope that was informative for people and gave a bit of an insight into some more advanced Monday automations. And I'll open it up.
Thank you so much, Aaron. That was really useful. Thanks so much. Please take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Take care, folks.